At my sister's sweet 16, my dad threw me a bucket and said, "Basement flooded. Clean it before guests get here." My mom added, "You're not hosting, just handle the mess." I looked at the breaker panel and said, "Handle it yourselves." 2 hours later, 40 guests were standing in the dark, and my sister was crying in her dress. Small favor before we start. If you've been watching and haven't subscribed yet, now would be the perfect time. The channel's trying to grow, and every single subscriber actually makes a difference. It's free, it's quick, and thank you so much for the support. Alright, let's get into today's story. Most people don't think about breaker panels. They sit in basements or garages, behind a metal door nobody opens unless something goes wrong. In my family's house, the breaker panel was in the far corner of the basement, behind the water heater, labeled in my handwriting because the electrician left without finishing and my father said labeling was something I could handle. That was 3 years ago. Since then, nobody else in the family has opened that metal door. Not once. On a Saturday in June, my sister Megan turned 16. The party was in my parents' backyard. I was not at the party, but every light at the party, every speaker, every warming tray, every outlet, every extension cord ran through work my hands had done. And by 7:38 that evening, all of it was dark. Let me start from the morning. The rain began around 10 a.m. Not hard, steady, the kind that settles in and doesn't leave. My mother had been up since 6, setting up the backyard. 40 chairs in rows. A long table for the cake. A photo backdrop that I had assembled the night before, silver and white, with a balloon arch my mother had ordered online and spent an hour inflating with a hand pump while complaining that nobody was helping her. My father hung the banner. Sweet 16 in silver letters, zip-tied to the back fence. The zip ties were mine. He had used my zip ties without asking, the way the family used most of my things. By noon the backyard was ready. The DJ arrived at 1 and started setting up his speakers on a folding table near the patio. He plugged into 2 extension cords that were already there, coiled neatly next to the table, ready to go. The cords were mine. From my toolbox in the garage. Nobody had asked for them. They were just expected to be there, the way electricity is expected to come out of a wall. The caterer arrived at 2 with warming trays and foil pans. The warming trays plugged into the kitchen outlets, which ran on circuit 3. The caterer didn't know that. Nobody needed to know that. The house just worked. The photographer came at 2:30 to test the light. She walked around the backyard and said the string lights would look perfect in the photos. 6 strands, 42 clips. 3 hours of my time the previous weekend, on a ladder, in the sun, because my father had tried for 40 minutes and given up. The string lights ran through a junction I had built at the patio outlet. The patio outlet was one I had installed the previous August, replacing a dead one. My father had looked at the dead outlet, looked at me, and the conversation was over before it started. I bought the parts at the hardware store with my employee discount. I installed it on a Saturday afternoon. The outlet cost $12 in parts and 3 hours of labor. Nobody said thank you. Nobody said anything. The outlet just worked, and the party was plugged into it, and 38 people would later stand in its light without knowing it existed. None of this involved me being present at the party. Nobody called me. Nobody texted. The party was a production, and I was not part of the cast. What I was part of was the infrastructure. The DJ's speakers were plugged into 2 extension cords. Both of them were mine, from my toolbox in the garage. The extension cords ran to a power strip that I had wired into the garage panel the previous summer after the old outlet shorted, and my father said calling an electrician was too expensive. The backyard string lights, 6 strands, 42 clips, ran from the patio outlet through a junction I had built myself. The patio outlet had been installed by me the previous August, replacing one that died, because my father looked at the dead outlet, and then looked at me, and the conversation was over before it started. The caterer's warming trays were plugged into the kitchen, which ran on circuit 3. The DJ was on circuits 9 and 11. The string lights were on 7 and 8. The patio was on 14. Every number was written on a label inside the breaker panel, in my handwriting, in black marker on white tape. I was at the hardware store that afternoon, working my weekend shift. The party was not something I had been invited to. The guest list, 40 names printed in 2 columns, had been taped to the refrigerator for 3 weeks. My name was not on it. What was on the refrigerator, next to the guest list, was a different piece of paper. A task list. My mother's handwriting. 11 items. My name was next to 7 of them. The last item said, stay out of photos. But that's something I didn't think about until later. At the time, on that Saturday afternoon, the only thing on my mind was finishing my shift and going home. My shift ended at 4. The plan was simple. Stop by my parents' house to drop off the backpack, grab something to eat, and leave before guests arrived. Nobody had asked me to stay. The task list had 7 jobs on it, but 6 of them were already done. I had set up the folding tables on Thursday. I had run the extension cords on Friday. I had checked the backyard lights that morning before leaving for work. I had moved the cars out of the driveway during my lunch break. The ice delivery had come while I was at the store, and my mother had handled it herself, which she mentioned twice on the phone like it was an achievement. The 7th task was conditional. Clean the basement if it floods. At 4:15, I walked through the front door of my parents' house with my backpack on my shoulder. The hallway smelled like the caterer's food and the lavender candle my mother always lit when company was coming. Through the back door, the backyard was visible. 40 chairs, string lights glowing against the gray sky. The DJ testing a microphone. Everything ready. My father was coming down the stairs. New shirt, light blue, creases still sharp from the package. Clean shaved, polished shoes. He was holding a yellow plastic bucket. Basement flooded. Clean it before guests get here. He said it the way he said everything that involved me and a task. Short, already turning away before the sentence ended. My mother appeared from the kitchen. Dress, earrings, the face she wore when the audience was about to arrive. You're not hosting. Just handle the mess. The bucket was in my hands. My father was walking back toward the kitchen. My mother was adjusting something on the dining table. Neither of them looked at me. There is something that happens when a sentence you have heard in different forms your whole life finally arrives in its clearest version. You're not hosting. Just handle the mess. That was the sentence. Not new, just finally honest. The basement door was open. From the top of the stairs, the sound of water was audible. A faint lapping against concrete. The drain had been backing up for 2 years. Every heavy rain pushed water through the old floor drain. A year ago, after the 3rd flood, I had called a plumber myself. The estimate came back at $212. Parts and labor. A morning's work. I had given the estimate to my father. He had folded it, put it in a kitchen drawer, and said he'd handle it. He never handled it. The drain stayed broken. The estimate stayed in the drawer. And every time it rained, somebody came looking for me. Not today. The bucket went on the floor. The sound of it was small. Plastic on wood. But my father heard it from the kitchen and turned around. What are you doing? Leaving. The basement is flooding. The drain has been broken for 2 years. You had an estimate for $200. We'll deal with it later. Right now there are people coming. There are people coming and your basement is flooding and the person you're asking to fix it isn't on the guest list. Those are your problems, not mine. My mother came back. What's going on? He's refusing to help, my father said. Nathan, go downstairs. No. Nathan. No. There are 40 people coming in less than 2 hours. The basement is flooding. This is not the time to be difficult. There are 40 people coming and a drain that's been broken for 2 years. You had an estimate. $212. I gave it to Dad a year ago. He put it in the kitchen drawer and never called the guy back. My father shifted. That's not the point right now. That is exactly the point right now. The drain is the point. The drain has always been the point. Every time it rained, someone came and found me. Not a plumber. Me. Nathan, your sister has been looking forward to this for months, my mother said. Her voice had shifted from instruction to something closer to negotiation. The backyard lights are on circuits 7 and 8. The DJ is on 9 and 11. The patio is on 14. The kitchen is on 3. If the water hits the base of the panel, every circuit in the house trips. That happens in about 2 hours if nobody does anything about the drain. My mother's face rearranged itself. Are you threatening us? The water is threatening you. I'm telling you how your own house works. This is your sister's night. You're going to ruin it over a bucket. You're not hearing me. I hung the string lights. I ran the extension cords. I wired the power strip. I installed the patio outlet. I set up the tables. I put up the banner. Every light in that backyard runs through something my hands touched. And my name is not on the guest list. The kitchen was quiet. Through the back door, the decorated yard was visible. The chairs, the lights, the banner, everything ready, everything working. For now, we didn't think you'd want to come, my mother said. You never seem interested in these things. You never asked. So what are you going to do? my father said. Flat voice. The voice he used when he expected the world to rearrange itself. Go home. The breaker panel is in the basement. The labels are in English. Handle it yourselves. The backpack went on my shoulder. Past my father, who did not move. Past my mother, whose hands had gone to her hips. Through the front door. Down the porch steps. The front yard was already set for guests. Cars would fill the driveway in less than 2 hours. The lawn was mowed. The walkway was swept. A small chalkboard sign near the mailbox said, "Welcome to Megan's Sweet 16, with an arrow pointing toward the side gate. My mother had bought the chalkboard at a craft store. The arrow was drawn in pink chalk. The car was on the street. Keys out. Door open. In. Through the windshield. The house looked like a house ready for a party. String lights visible over the fence. The banner catching wind. The balloon arch gleaming near the back door. Every visible piece of the event was something my hands had touched. The zip ties on the banner. The clips on the lights. The outlet behind the patio. The power strip in the garage. The extension cords under the DJ's table. The engine started. The house shrank in the rearview mirror and then disappeared behind a row of trees. The drive home took 20 minutes. The rain was still falling. The wipers moved at a steady pace that felt like a countdown to something that had already been decided. At my apartment, shoes off, backpack on the counter, a glass of water. The apartment was small. 1 bedroom. A kitchen with a window that looked out on a parking lot. No decorations. No string lights. No 40 chairs. Just quiet. The phone buzzed at 5:22. My mother. Nathan, come back right now. 5:24. This is not funny. 5:31. Your sister is going to be devastated. No reply. The phone went on the kitchen table, screen up. Not to read the messages. To watch the clock. At 5:45, my father called. Voicemail. No message. At 6:10, my mother called. She left a voicemail. Nathan, I don't know what point you're making, but people are arriving in 20 minutes and the basement is getting worse. No call back. The apartment was quiet in a way the family house never was. No voices through walls. No footsteps above. No mother adjusting something in the next room. Just rain on the window and a glass of water on the table and a phone that buzzed every few minutes with a new version of the same request from people who had watched me fix things for 3 years and never once asked how any of it worked. The clock on the microwave was visible from the kitchen table. The math was in my head without effort. Steady rain. Broken drain. The water rose at a rate the last 3 floods had taught me. 2 inches at 3 p.m. Another inch every 90 minutes or so. The panel base sat 18 inches off the floor. At the current rate, the water would reach the bottom connection somewhere around 7:30 or 7:40. The party was supposed to peak around then. The speech. The cake. The moment my mother had spent 4 months building toward. The clock said 6:28. At 6:30, the guests started arriving. 40 people walking into a backyard that looked exactly like what my mother had spent 4 months building. String lights glowing in neat rows across the yard. DJ playing the kind of music that makes 16-year-old girls grab each other's hands and scream. Caterers' trays steaming on the long table. The photographer moving through the crowd, taking candids, angling for the string lights in the background of every shot. Megan was in the center of it. White dress. Hair done. Nails done. Her friends formed a circle around her that moved when she moved, like a constellation with one bright star in the middle. She was laughing. The laugh of a girl who has never had a reason to wonder where the lights come from, or who hung them, or why her brother isn't here. My mother moved through the guests the way she moved through every event she produced. Touching shoulders. Accepting compliments. You outdid yourself, Linda. The backyard looks incredible. Those lights are gorgeous. She smiled at each one. We worked so hard on it, she said. The word, we, had a specific border around it. Inside the border, herself, her husband, her daughter. Outside the border, the person who actually did the work. At one point, the photographer gathered the family near the banner for a photo. My mother positioned herself next to Megan. My father stood behind them. 3 people in the frame. Flash. The person who built the banner, wired the lights, installed the outlet, and ran the cords was not in the photo. The 7th item on the task list, written in my mother's handwriting, had taken care of that. Stay out of photos. My father was standing near the grill, which was not being used because the caterer had brought everything, but standing near the grill was what he did at events. It gave him a position. It made him look like he was contributing something besides instructions. Below them all, in the basement nobody was checking, the water was rising. At 7:14, Megan texted, "Are you seriously doing this right now? Mom says the power might go out. This is MY night." At 7:22, my father, "The water is at the bottom of the panel. Tell me which breaker to pull." 7:23, Nathan, I'm serious. 7:25, which one is the ground fault? There are 30 switches in here. 7:31, a photo. The basement. Phone flashlight. Water at the base of the panel. My labels visible. Kitchen. Living room. Backyard outlet. Patio lights. My handwriting asking for help from a phone that was face down on a counter. The clock on the microwave said 7:35. At 7:38, the phone went quiet. At 7:39, my mother, "The power just went out." The text arrived within minutes of when it should have. Something moved in my chest. Not guilt. Recognition. The system performed exactly as expected when the person who maintained it stopped maintaining it. Then Megan, "I hate you." Then my mother, 40 people standing in the dark. The cake is sitting in a dark kitchen. Your sister is crying in her dress. Are you happy now? The phone went face down. 2 days later, my cousin Derek called. He had been one of the 40. He told me what happened from the inside. The power died at 7:38. Backyard lights first. All 6 strands going dark at once, like a hand had reached up and pulled the plug, which is essentially what the water had done. Then the patio light. Then the DJ's speakers, cutting a pop song about being 16 right in the middle of the chorus. Then the kitchen. Then everything. 40 people in a backyard that was a party 30 seconds ago and was now a dark yard with dead string lights and a silent speaker on a folding table. About 5 seconds of total silence, Derek said. Not confused silence. Shocked silence. The kind where nobody moves because the brain hasn't caught up to the eyes. Then phone flashlights started coming on. Small white squares pointing in every direction, like 40 people suddenly realized they were in a cave. Megan was standing near the cake table. She had been about to give her speech. White dress. Hair done. Her friends in a half circle. Phones up, ready to record. When the lights went, the recording phones became flashlights. Megan stood there for a few seconds, lit from below by her best friend's phone screen. Then she started crying. Quiet crying. The kind that comes from a 16-year-old girl whose night just ended and nobody is telling her why. The mother went into performance mode immediately. She walked to the center of the yard with her own phone flashlight and said, loud enough for everyone, "It's just temporary. A circuit tripped. Someone is working on it right now. Give us just a minute." Her voice was the voice of a woman who had spent 4 months controlling every detail of an event and was now controlling the only thing she had left, which was the story of what was happening. But nobody was working on it. The someone she was talking about was sitting at a kitchen table 20 minutes away. The father went to the basement. Derek followed him to the top of the stairs and watched from above. The father, in his new blue shirt, wading through ankle-deep water. Phone flashlight cutting across the surface, bouncing off the concrete walls. He reached the far corner. The breaker panel. He opened the metal door. Nathan's labels on every switch. Kitchen. Living room. Backyard outlet. Patio lights. Master bedroom. Garage. Basement. Black marker on white tape. Clean block letters. 3 years old. He tried the first breaker. Flipped it off and on. Nothing. Second breaker. Nothing. Third. Nothing. He tried 5 switches in a row. The house stayed dark. The problem was not the breakers. The problem was 4 inches of water touching the bottom of the panel, and no amount of flipping switches was going to fix that. He stood there. His phone flashlight pointed at the labels. His son's handwriting on every switch in the house. He had lived in that house for over 20 years and was reading his own breaker panel for the first time. In the dark. In 4 inches of water. While 40 people stood in his yard and his daughter cried above him. He just stood there, Derek said, reading the labels. One by one. For a long time, man. I don't think he moved for about 2 minutes. Upstairs, the party was ending itself. A few of Megan's friends stayed, sitting on the back steps with their phone flashlights aimed at each other, trying to pretend the party was still happening. Most of the adults left. Polite excuses. Early morning tomorrow. Let us know if you need anything. So sorry about this. Cars pulling out of the driveway one by one, headlights sweeping across the front of the house that my mother had decorated to look perfect. The caterer packed up by phone flashlight, loading foil pans and warming trays into a van without being asked. The DJ disconnected his speakers quietly, wrapping cables in the dark with the practiced movements of a man who has worked enough bad events to know when one is over. The three-tier cake sat on the table in the kitchen, untouched, candles never lit. By 8:15, half the guests were gone. By 8:30, the backyard was empty. Megan went upstairs. The mother sat at the kitchen table in the dark, alone, in a house full of decorations for a party that no longer existed. The father was still in the basement. Derek paused on the phone. One more thing. When the lights first went, one of Megan's friends asked what happened. Your mom said it was an electrical issue. I said, where's Nathan? Doesn't he usually fix this stuff? Your mom looked at me for about 2 seconds. Then she turned around and walked away without saying a word. 3 days after the party, Megan went to the kitchen for water. The refrigerator still had the same papers from the weeks before. Coupons, a dentist card, and the 2 lists, side by side, where they had been for 3 weeks. Guest list on the left, task list on the right. She read the guest list. 40 names. Hers at the top. She read the task list. 7 items. Nathan next to each one. The last item, stay out of photos. 2 pieces of paper, 4 inches apart, that said everything the family had never said out loud. 1 list for the people who belonged. 1 list for the person who made it possible. Her text arrived at 9:47 p.m. 2 words, I didn't know. No reply. But the text stayed. Not deleted. A week after the party, the phone rang. My father. 6 rings before the answer button got pressed. Not forgiveness. Curiosity about what a man sounds like after a week in a house he cannot maintain. Silence for a few seconds. I should have called the plumber. 6 words. Not an apology for the bucket. Not an apology for the task list. Not an apology for stay out of photos written in his wife's handwriting. 6 words about a drain that cost $200 to fix and a son that cost more than that to lose. No answer. Silence for a few more seconds. The line went dead. 1 month later. A new apartment. Smaller, but the lease had 1 name on it, and it was mine. Boxes half unpacked. A mattress on the bedroom floor. Tools in a crate by the door. The same tools that had lived in my father's garage for 3 years before he noticed they were mine. On top of the crate, a roll of white tape and a black marker. Same brand. Same width. The breaker panel in the new apartment was in the hallway closet. A metal door with 12 switches. None of them labeled. The tape came off the roll. The marker cap came off. Kitchen. Bathroom. Living room. Bedroom. Same handwriting. Same clean block letters. Same steady hand. Different house.